three-part series of videos, we'll be discussing the causes of the Civil War. Now, these will be done in chronological or mostly chronological order rather than thematic order, going from the year 1820 to the year 1861 when the Civil War actually broke out. Discussed in these videos will be events, laws, and crises that actually led to the division of the United States and the outbreak of the American Civil War. The desire to keep a balance of power in Congress between free and slave states became an issue in 1820. That year, Missouri requested to enter the Union as a slave state. If Missouri was to be admitted, the slave states would overpower the free states in Congress. A compromise, however, was worked out between Northerners and Southerners in Congress. This compromise became known as the Missouri Compromise. Missouri would be allowed to join the United States as a slave state, with Maine also entering but as a free state, thereby maintaining that balance of power in Congress. Also, in an attempt to resolve future issues regarding states entering the Union, Congress agreed that no slavery would be permitted north of the 36 degrees, 30-minute north line of latitude in the Louisiana Territory, with Missouri, of course, being the notable exception. However, territories south of that line would be permitted to have slavery. This applied to the Louisiana Territory and not lands further to the west due to the fact that the United States did not own that land yet. The Missouri Compromise was successful for a time. That is until the United States borders greatly expanded almost 3 decades later. The results of the Mexican-American War helped contribute to the growing sectional crisis in the United States. The war, in brief, was caused due to the annexation of Texas. Annexing means to add territory to your political control. So in 1836, Texas declared independence from Mexico. Prior to independence, Texas had been a sparsely populated region of Mexico. Americans were invited to settle into the territory, however, many of them brought slaves with them. Slavery was in fact illegal in Mexico. When Mexico made the attempt to enforce its own laws, people living in Texas declared independence. So President James K. Polk took office in 1845 on a strong platform of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was the idea that the United States was destined to expand across the North American continent. Polk also made the promise to annex Texas. The issue, however, was that Mexico did not recognize Texas's independence even following the War for Texas independence, and conflict between the United States and Mexico quickly arose. War did eventually break out, with the United States somewhat quickly winning the war. On February 2nd, 1848, the two nations signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. In the treaty, the United States gained what was called Upper California and New Mexico. These are the present-day states of California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Wyoming and Colorado. Additionally, the Rio Grande was established as the border between Texas and Mexico. In return for taking half of Mexico's entire territory, the United States also agreed to pay them $15 million, which kind of seems like a small price to pay when you're taking literally half of an entire country. The territory gained in the treaty is known as the Mexican Cession. So the new territory that the United States now had presented an issue for Congress, as the majority of the Mexican Cession laid south of the Missouri Compromise line. If the Missouri Compromise was applied to the Mexican Cession, then power would swing in favor of the southern states. But before the war even ended, Northern congressmen saw the potential for the additional of slave territory to the nation and acted. In response to this possibility of a huge swath of new slave territory, Pennsylvania Congressman David Wilmot put forth a bill providing President Polk with $2 million to help with peace talks with Mexico. However, included in this bill was a provision prohibiting slavery in any lands gained from Mexico, regardless of whether or not Polk purchased the territory from Mexico or if the United States won this territory in the war. The Wilmot Proviso, as it was called, did not pass Congress. However, it proved to actually be significant. It was the very first time Congress clearly voted along sectional lines, and this helped draw what you could really consider the starting point of the road to the American Civil War. The decision regarding slavery in the Mexican Cession rose rather quickly following the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. With the discovery of gold and the subsequent gold rush, California grew rapidly following the Mexican-American War. As a result, it quickly applied for statehood. So the question became, would it enter as a free state or a slave state? The majority of California laid south of the 36 degrees 30-minute north line that was established in the Missouri Compromise. Therefore, Southern states demanded that California be brought to the Union as a slave state. In fact, the South wanted the Missouri Compromise to apply to all of the new territories gained in the Mexican Cession. The North refused to accept this as they were fearful of what they thought was a growing slaveholding power in Congress. So, once again, another compromise was needed. This time, Kentucky Senator Henry Clay, with the support of Massachusetts Senator Daniel Webster, developed a compromise that would become known as the Compromise of 1850. The compromise intended to relax sectional tensions by appeasing Northerners and Southerners. The compromise contained 4 elements. First, California would enter the Union as a free state. Second, New Mexico and Utah would have popular sovereignty regarding the slavery issue. Popular sovereignty means that the residents of those territories would have the right to decide for themselves if they would have slavery. In general, though, the term can be applied to the right of a people to vote or to decide any issue. Third, the slave trade, but not slavery itself, would be eliminated from Washington, D.C. And remember, Washington, D.C. is actually in the South. It is broken up from pieces of the states of Virginia and Maryland, who are 2 southern states. And finally, the Compromise of 1850 included a new Fugitive Slave Act. Although the Compromise of 1850 did not make everyone happy, it really upset abolitionists due to the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act required all law enforcement officials to arrest known runaway or fugitive slaves. If they refused, they were fined quite a substantial amount. But if they did make an arrest, they would receive a reward. The issue here is that all that was required to make an arrest was a claim that a person was a runaway slave. And once arrested, the accused runaway did not have the right to a trial by jury or any legal representation. In effect, many free African Americans could be forced into slavery without much of a chance to prove their status as a free person. Abolitionists were people who supported ending slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act caused increased activity among abolitionists to either help African Americans escape to Canada or to utilize violent means to rescue fugitive slaves. Of key importance to runaway slaves was the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was a system of escape routes and a network of people committed to leading slaves to freedom. So-called conductors helped runaways by hiding them, providing food and water, and directing them to the next stop on their way north. The most famous of these conductors was Harriet Tubman, a runaway slave herself. Following the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, she made 19 journeys into the South, helping around 300 slaves find their way to freedom. One influential abolitionist was William Lloyd Garrison, the editor of the anti-slavery newspaper The Liberator. In his paper, he called for the immediate emancipation of all slaves and advocated for nonviolence and peaceful means to bring about the end of slavery. However, potentially the most influential of all abolitionist works was the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. The novel illustrated the cruelties of slavery and emphasized abolition was not just a political cause, but a moral one as well. Uncle Tom's Cabin was highly successful and was in fact the best-selling novel of the entire 19th century. For many Northerners who were exposed to the novel and the subsequent plays, this was their first exposure to the slave experience and converted many of them to the abolitionist cause. In the South, however, people were appalled by the novel and claimed that Stowe's work was highly exaggerated. Many Southerners made attempts to counteract the impact of the novel, but in the end proved to be unsuccessful. The novel had such an impact that upon meeting Stowe in 1862, a year into the American Civil War, President Lincoln said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war."